Welcome to She is Resilient, a podcast for women on their healing journeys who are ready to start living their most authentic and empowered lives outside of survival mode. I'm your host, Tatiana, trauma and somatic therapist, as well as a holistic coach, and I'm on a mission to help more women heal their nervous systems. Each week, me and my guests are going to get real and vulnerable about the experiences that led us to becoming the empowered and resilient women we are today. You'll leave this podcast with the skills, knowledge, and inspiration to start creating the life you deserve. Because if another woman can do it, so can you. Welcome back to another episode of She is Resilient. Today we have Lisa, my friend Lisa, on the podcast. Lisa, tell the audience who you are and what you do for a living.
Oh man, that's such a loaded question, I feel, because we are so many things,
Mhm.
so many things. And, we play so many roles. So let me just start with what I did today. So I'm an assistant principal at an elementary school. And before that, I was an educator, so I've done education my whole life. While at the same time, starting a coaching business. I'm an author, um, first generation Latina, yeah, just so many things that I think to say this is who I am is kind of hard to put into words sometimes because we just fill so many different roles in our life.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's who I
1000%.
am in a nutshell.
Yes. Yeah, there's like a tiny, tiny bit of who you are, like little tiny piece.
Yeah.
So, this podcast is all about sharing our journey, our healing journey, our struggles, the things that we've overcome that led us to become the empowered women we are today. And I know you are a very empowered woman. So tell us a little bit about how you got to this version of you. What were some of the things that you've experienced or have overcome that led you to becoming this version of you?
Yeah. I think one of the most impactful experiences in my adulthood has been just going through a divorce. I think it allowed me for the first time the opportunity to do what I wanted to do. And I know it sounds kind of bizarre because, I committed a life to another person, right? And unfortunately, we didn't work out. And, when that happens and the compatibility or alignment, um, you realize it just wasn't ever there. You were just trying really hard because you grew up in an atmosphere of people pleasing. And these are the societal norms of what I have to do with my life. You get that, I don't know, something always happens, right? A circumstance kind of triggers it. And from that circumstance, you can decide, or at least I believe we have the decision to change. And change is going to be hard because it's going to require us to either learn something new or unlearn something about ourselves that requires the new learning, right?
Mhm.
And so I think my divorce definitely triggered that. And at the same time, it also allowed me to feel my emotions that I had been kind of hiding away. So most people when they meet me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're always so calm, you're so happy." And I am now, but I think I'm in a more genuine space now, whereas before it was just an expectation. And so I just kind of did that, right? And I wasn't happy and I was depressed. And then when the whole situation of going through a separation and a divorce, um, it just it made me realize, like, "Oh my gosh, I think I was depressed even while I was married, and I didn't know that." And how disheartening that can be because you have to, like, then make amends with, I never did give myself the opportunity to show up as the best version of myself in this relationship. And it takes two. So I'm not disregarding like what all I experienced in that divorce. Because if I told you, nobody would like, or I didn't even believe it at the time. um, but it also gave me that space to breathe and to reset. And I think we don't talk enough about the reset struggle
Mm,
because that's hard. It's hard to stop and pivot to what is better for you.
mhm,
Um, it's easier to just live in denial or say, these are all the different reasons why I cannot change or why I cannot do what I really want to do. And I mean, I think that we don't even know how to name that character trait, right? It's not one that it's so accepted. Like, I guess that's the best way to put it. It's so accepted to say, I can't, and I get it. Oh, yeah, you can't get a divorce because you have kids, or because financially you're not in a good place, or because, right? Like, when we have to make those big, hard decisions, we give every reason not to do it. But really, what's happening is that fear factor of the unknown, right? Like, I've become so familiar with the world around me that I continue to repeat the patterns that are keeping me comfortable in a uncomfortable or unhealthy relationship, whether that's with, and I now see it in a greater scope, right? Because it could be like with food, it could be with relationship with friends, with family. It's just a relationship that we have with the world around us that we create.
mhm.
So, it's just yeah, it's like the blinders came off.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I'm curious to know if the decision of getting a divorce was made for you or if you had made that decision.
So, 4 years after, right? So, actually, this would have been the time of year that I had made the decision.
Oh.
Um, I think that's a really good question for 2 reasons. 4 years ago, Lisa would have responded with, "I was forced to make that decision for
Mhm,
it was placed upon me."
mhm,
4 years fast forward to now, I think it was a decision I made for myself, and it liberated me to make the decision. The decision itself of getting a divorce didn't liberate me. It was the knowing I could make a choice for myself,
mm,
no
mhm,
matter what the consequences, was liberating
mhm,
because I could recreate my life, even though at that time I was very upset, sad, trying to figure everything out. And I was in this state of like freeze where I just was operating out of, and it was COVID, right? So that was also a blessing. Um, and I don't like to say blessing in disguise because I feel like a blessing is a blessing, right? There is no disguise behind it. Um, but I think it was a blessing because it forced me to isolate myself, um, to really make a decision, to really see my life, right? And it was in that moment that I was like, either I can continue this for the next 10 years and see what happens and wait for somebody else to change,
mhm,
or I just make this decision and allow ourselves to go our separate ways. Because obviously, the patterns we're nurturing are not healthy to either one,
mhm,
right? But I think now, 4 years later, it's like it was one of the most difficult decisions to make for myself. Um, most empowering decision to make for myself. And it was, yeah, it was the empowerment of making that choice for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah. In that,
Even though sorry, even though it would impact, like, I knew it was gonna impact everybody around me because they had no like, they really didn't have any idea because I hid it so well. I mean, I really did mask my emotions
your
about
your
that.
spouse.
Well, I masked my emotions
Mhm.
with everybody outside of my because, I mean, being a Latina, right, like, everybody knows your business,
Yeah.
and they wanna know your business,
Yeah.
yet they're only open to know or privileged to know what you share, right?
Mhm.
So I only shared the good. I didn't quite share the bad.
Yeah, totally.
So when people found out that, like my family found out, it
Mhm.
was like a shock. What do
Mhm.
you mean? What are you doing? You've lost your mind,
Mhm.
and they didn't know the circumstances. And also, they were okay with what was going on,
Mhm.
like you have to work through it. You have to, um, you're married for life. You didn't marry for temporary, pleasure. But it was like, but the level of, you know, just disrespect
Mhm.
and the level of, you know, there wasn't intimacy in that sense, right? Like being completely transparent
Mhm.
um, was just a really hard realization that I couldn't. And it's at that point that I realized I don't need to prove myself to anybody. Like,
Mhm.
I can make a choice without having to prove why I'm making my choice.
Mhm.
That was really hard for me because I felt like I would grew up in an environment of I have to justify my decisions.
Totally. Yeah. And there doesn't need to be a reason for why you want to leave a relationship or a marriage, right? Like things could be perfect and you are still allowed to leave if you want to, right?
Mhm.
I think it's so interesting how you bring up the freeze state because earlier you said that there was this calmness, but you were masking a lot of your emotions, right? And now there's this genuine calmness where you truly do feel calm inside and out, right? And I think that happens so often when you are in a freeze state. There's this calmness, but this calmness might come from numbness or disconnection, right? And you might think your entire life that you are a quote unquote calm person, but maybe in reality, what you're feeling is nothing at all, right? And that's disconnection. And it sounds like after you left that marriage, you were able to come to the conclusion where you were living in this state of freeze or depression. You were experiencing symptoms of depression. And I'm curious to know what was that process like for you, or that healing process like for you coming out of that freeze state?
Yeah. So it was messy. I felt like I was just broken and I saw all these pieces just shattered and I didn't even know where to begin,
Mhm.
right? Like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
Mhm.
But I not at any moment did I feel regret for making the decisions that I made. Um, and I think that I say that I was in this free state because I was like literally checking boxes, like, okay, this is next. Okay, this is next. And so when the divorce was finalized, it was so ironic because I had reached out to get an appointment with a therapist. And of course, at that time, it was taking a while because we were like right in the middle of the pandemic, right? And so therapists were like saturated with clients. And so she could only see me the day after I signed my divorce. And I had already requested it like a full month in advance.
Mhm.
And I didn't put two and two together, right? And so it was interesting that it happened that way, because then I realized, like, I have no more boxes to check in regards to getting paperwork done, getting my house sold, selling all my things, moving to an apartment, like figuring out this new life for myself, right? Like I was done,
Mhm.
done. And then I was like, what do I do with myself now?
Mhm.
Because I don't recognize who I am. So
Mhm.
I think when I think of a free state, there comes this point where, like, it's an out of body experience where you see your life and you're just so sad.
Mhm.
Like, this is not what I intended it to be. Right.
Mhm.
And I thought, and so it was like coming to this like realization, but I was doing what people asked me to do. I followed the blueprint of my life. I am not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be thinking of what kind of, how many kids am I supposed to have? What do we do? Do we change out the flooring? Like those things, right? And I am now starting from ground zero. And I started it financially, and I started it like in all aspects of my life. And then I started to question everything. Like, does this even make me happy? Like, it's what I'm doing make me happy? Is what I am like. And so when people say, like, when you see healing on Instagram, right? Or like any social media, it's like, oh, this beautiful euphoric experience. It's like it is the worst experience. And you feel so alone because it's your unique journey. And you have to be okay that that's your unique journey. Um, and I discovered that I am naturally a calm person, but the calm that I feel now is safety,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's the most powerful thing that helps me distinguish between the calm and the freeze and the calm of safety, and how distinct we operate in those two worlds, right? Because I think when we're in freeze mode, we make decisions out of fear. And now I get to make decisions out of courage.
Mhm.
And gosh, like that is so, just like to even hear myself say that, I'm like, damn, it's really like powerful. And
Yes.
I wish I could share that experience with everybody around me, but I also now know that everybody is on a different, they're on their unique journey, and they're going to experience things. Some will get to that point, some will not. And that's okay, right? Like, how do I accept the world around me when the world within me is so limited to alignment with people in my life? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, and do you mean like some will get there and some won't? Like the people around you, is that what you're kind of referring to?
Yeah. So, perfect example. I have a really good friend. I've been friends with her since I was like fifth grade.
Mhm.
Love her so much.
Mhm.
And she's going through her own healing, right? And she shares with me, like, just, and before, like, when I was going through my divorce and when I was going through this journey, like, I honestly felt like very disconnected to her. I felt like we couldn't relate to one another. Like she didn't really understand me. And I didn't expect her to, but yet I did. I don't know. It was really weird. It was like just this disconnectedness.
Mhm.
Um, but now that she's going through her own healing journey and I hear her talk sometimes, like I'm so grateful to be able to hold space for her. Um, because I do remember how lonely that path was for a while, until I started to build that safety within myself of like, it's okay to feel my emotions. It's okay that I don't need to justify myself to anybody. Um, it's okay for Lisa to want what she wants and go for it, right? Like those kinds of things. And so being able to provide that support to her, it's like, yes, like, I'm so sorry you're going through that, but I'm so happy too, because when you get through this muck, gosh, you're going to appreciate like the greener grass that you're cultivating right now, you know?
Yeah, you can see what's on the other side of healing.
Yeah. And I know that I can't bring everybody with me, right? Because like there are still people in my life that are struggling and in the struggle. Um, and I know now, like, you're operating out of fear, and
Mhm,
that's okay right now. Like, I don't want that for you because you don't want that for anybody,
mhm,
right? But I also accept that that's where you are, and I
mhm,
get it. It's
mhm.
hard,
Totally.
but I'm here when you're ready,
Mhm,
kind of thing.
mhm. I love that. I love that I'm here when you're ready because I think that it's really difficult when you're on a healing journey or when you're on the other side of the healing journey and maybe those around you aren't at that same stage as you are, it can be really difficult to be in relationship with them. And you're saying I'm here when you're ready. It's just kind of leaving the door open versus we're not in the same level, we're not in the same healing journey, our lives are completely different, goodbye, right? And not that that's a bad thing, because I think that sometimes when you are on the other side of the healing journey, sometimes you do have to distance yourself from people whose dysregulated nervous systems are impacting yours, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I really like how you're approaching it, where you're just saying, yeah, I'm here when you're ready and the door is open.
Yeah, because I think I've also come to learn that a lot of it has to do with me, right? Like, I can't undo my relationship with my sister, right? Because we are a very close knit family in that sense, not to the level of having a hard conversation together, right? Because I can see the patterns that I carried with me in them, right? But more in the sense of like we do come together when things get really difficult, like with parents or just family things, right? We do lean on one another. Um, it's hard for me, and it was based off the experience that I had. But now I've kind of, because I am more accepting of that, right? Like everybody's on their own path, and I can't take everyone with me.
Mhm.
And I have to be okay with how they want to live their life. I have to set boundaries for myself, and I
Mhm.
have to learn how to do that. And
Mhm.
so I really have been like, I feel like this whole past year, I've been practicing what boundaries look like for Lisa,
Mhm.
and um, just really, you know, figuring myself out as this new version of me or higher version of myself, right? Like that, it's not
Yeah.
new. It's just, it was hidden. And so now I have the opportunity to raise it.
1000%. I love that. I think that we don't really become new people when we heal. I think we just learn how to access what was already inside of us, right? I'm curious to know if you feel comfortable sharing, what does it look like to learn boundaries for yourself? What has that journey looked like for you, if you want to share?
Yeah.
Maybe
Um,
like one example.
yeah, like it's a trial and error, I feel. Um, because I don't know, like, okay, very like simple or surface space is like even how do I share a boundary? Like how do I verbalize a boundary for myself, right? Like it's like I had to identify what are my core values and does this align with my core values? Am I okay that it does or does not align, right? Like making that decision and then determining, okay, it doesn't, so how do I share that with the other person? Because their job is not to guess me.
Right.
My job is to share me. And if it's not for them, that's okay. If
Mm,
it's not for me, I need to be strong enough to say it, you know? And I have a boyfriend, right? And like that's yeah, I know.
That's so exciting.
It's exciting and also daunting at the
Yeah.
same time
I'm
because I think I had to like set a lot of boundaries and not a lot, but just like be really honest with myself on what do I want? How do I want to show up in this relationship?
Mhm.
And what do I know now that I didn't know then? Right? Like, how can I still honor who I was, right? But being that better version of vocalizing my needs and wants. And I
Mhm.
think that's why going back to it's okay for Lisa to have needs and wants and go for it.
Mhm.
And those who want to take part in it, great. Those who don't want to celebrate it, it's okay too. I'm going to celebrate me. I don't need you to celebrate me. I'm just sharing this with you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. I always tell people that people who need boundaries are going to get upset when you set a boundary, right? Those are the people who need the boundaries the most. And so it's okay to vocalize your needs and your wants. And if they get upset, if the other person gets upset, they're allowed to be upset, right? Like they're allowed that emotion, but their emotion is not your responsibility. And just
Yes.
because they have a strong emotion to it doesn't mean that you were wrong for vocalizing that need or want.
Yes. And I think that that's the thing, right? Like even in the job that I do have, right? Like my 9 to 5. um of being an assistant principal or an administrator, I realized I didn't have boundaries. I didn't practice them as an administrator because that's what we are um, conditioned to do,
Yeah.
right? Like, I need you to be readily available all the time, right?
Mhm.
And so having to just dip my foot back into education, because side note, I did leave it for a little while and I had a big resentment towards it. Um, but I had to work through that. And then now I'm here, but I get to practice a better version of myself in
Mhm.
this role,
Mhm.
and it's, um, so even then, being able to just take a step back and say, like, Lisa, like, you're doing too much.
Mhm.
It's okay to not have to do 130% all the time. They
Mhm.
can look like 50. And if that's your 100 today, because that's where you are, then that's it. And
Mhm.
it's okay to share with people, you know what, I'm just not. It's okay. Like, I don't have to chime in. I don't have to have the answer. I don't have, it's just like liberating yourself from the have tos, right? Or I
Mhm.
should do this
Yeah.
to, I don't have to do anything.
I love that. Yes, you don't have to do anything. I love that so much because it's so true. When we think about life, we don't have to do anything that we don't want to, right? And once we truly connect with that, once we really allow those words to land inside, it becomes so liberating.
Yeah. And, Tatiana, like one of the biggest learnings that I share with people is that this is not like a one and done. Like it's a practice. So I
Mhm,
really do refer to it a little bit more as like this is my practice. Like I practice setting boundaries. I don't set them just raw.
mhm,
I practice setting them
mhm,
because I might as a practitioner, I'm allowing myself to be human and make mistakes
mhm,
and to go back and say, "Oh, that was wrong," right? Like, and it's like removing my ego from it. And I
mhm,
think when you start to really recognize, is this my ego that's being bothered, or what is it that's being bothered, right? Like, why does this person like really get under my skin? What within me do I need to address? Like, it's not them. They can be whoever they want and do whatever they want, Lisa. Like,
yep.
how do I release that control, that need for control that's really controlling me?
Mm-hmm.
right? So like when they're in a bad mood, I don't have to be in a bad mood with them.
Oh
I
my
don't care who
God.
you are.
Yes, that's such a mic drop moment. I love that so much.
I think it's like, so for example, when we talk about the celebrating you, right? Or like going the same path as you, or seeing your perspective. Like sometimes we get really caught up with, you have to see my perspective. So I'm going to give you an outline of all the reasons why, right? Like I stopped doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would catch myself. Now I can realize, like, oh, why do I want to control how this person sees my point of view? Right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
control piece.
Yes.
And then I realized, like, it's like and and now I do give myself time to like think and respond, right? Whereas before I reacted. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think when we give ourselves that space to really respond, we go through a series of reflection in our mind. And ultimately, I ask myself, and this has been a really helpful question for myself, is how do I want to show up in this situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does this better version of me want to be seen and looked at? And not that I have that control, but how do I want to walk away? What
Mm-hmm.
emotion do I want to walk away with? Not
Mm-hmm.
how it sits with you,
Yeah.
but how does it sit with me when I'm driving home,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's where we start to like build the guilt and shame of like, dang, I blew up with that person. And some people, I don't know how they do it, honestly, like to like do those things and then be like okay with it. Like, you know what I mean? And maybe they're not. I don't know, right? Like I don't know their internal world. But I know with me, like I would shame myself, like, damn it, like that's not how I wanted to show up. Like I yelled at that person or I snapped at that person. And even like in my relationship, when I was married, like there were plenty of times when I would allow for that irritation to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would snap back or I'd have a comeback or I'd have like this, I don't know, just this ugliness to me that to me it wasn't okay. Like maybe to the other person is like, whatever, who cares, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. And
But
I feel like, go ahead.
no, but I think that that's just like the how do I want to show up in this conversation? Like, am
Mm-hmm.
I going to be a listener? Am I going to be um, just sharing my thought and then letting that other person take it how they want? I don't know, right? Like, it just depends on the situation. But I think I'm more um, in tune with who I am
Mm-hmm.
to be able to provide a better version of me in that situation.
1000%. Yeah. You're more in tune with who you are, and you've grown that capacity in your system to have that awareness, right? And I think that's the difficult piece, right? You're going to have even just a little bit of desire to want to grow and evolve and change, right? Because if we don't have that bit of desire to change, like if we don't think that there's anything wrong with us, then we're not going to take those tiny steps to grow the capacity to have that awareness, right? Because I think that the reason that you can say, how do I want to show up, is because you've been through the healing journey. You've done the work, the internal work, to be able to say, okay, how do I want to show up today? And I think that's the difficult piece, right? Like if we have people around us that don't have that capacity just yet, or don't have that awareness or ability to say, how do I want to show up? And they're just reacting from their wounds, right? From their dysregulated nervous systems.
Yeah. And sometimes I do share about like dysregulated nervous system and like you're operating out of that. Like, and it's okay. I get it, right? Like, but what will help you regulate your nervous system? I realize like people are like, what the fuck is she talking about?
Totally. Yeah.
And, and then I realize like, you know, I was having a conversation with a friend, and she was sharing with me life is challenging right now. And my biggest question to her, like, because I know she's operating in a dysregulated nervous system, and as a friend, I hurt because I see you hurting, right? Like that empathetic piece of me. But I framed it in a way of, and I was actually working on my blog right before I got on this podcast of sharing, like, how do you want to fill your cup this weekend? Like, that was my question to her. And
Mm.
she was just like, I don't want to, And it just was like, but I just kind of let her sit with that. Like, I think when we talk about regulating our nervous system, for other people, it's your cup is not being filled right now.
Mhm.
Like, how do you want to fill that cup?
Mhm.
What do you want to do for you,
Mhm.
guilt free?
Mhm.
And allow yourself that guilt free moment,
Mhm.
right? Like, I don't mean like go crazy, but really, like, what nourishing thing will help you get through this? And I think that's the gift of healing, is that it builds that resilience in you
Mhm.
to navigate the difficult part, because that's where you build resilience, in the challenge, in the muck, in the weeds of things.
Mhm.
And you don't just build it by reading a book and then I'm ready.
Yeah, totally.
As much as we want it to, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. And that's why I go back to, it's a practice. It's a practice of how I want to show up. It's a practice of being self-aware. It's a practice of filling my cup. It's a
Mhm.
practice of setting boundaries
Mhm.
and learning how to do that, but also unlearning some of the things that we've been conditioned to learn.
1000%. Yeah, I love that so much. And you touched on resiliency just now, and I'm curious to know what your definition of resiliency is. And for the people listening to this podcast who are maybe just starting out on their healing journey, how can they begin to build that resiliency or create that resiliency in their bodies and their nervous system?
Um, how do I define resilience? So, to me, resilience is the ability to show up as a better version of yourself in the next challenge or in your current challenge, right? Like, situations in your life will never be perfect. You will always be challenged, whether it's at work, like, that is a part of our life. And so once we accept that, right, we start flowing towards that, right? We have the opportunity to grow. And that resilience is that growth. Like, what am I learning and unlearning? What does a better me want to do now? Right? I now know this about myself because I experienced this. How do I want to take this as an opportunity for growth?
Mm.
So I think that is resilience to me. It's like a bits and pieces of all these other things that we have to practice, or that we don't have to practice anything, right? But if we want to grow, that's where it starts. And I think resilience are the tools that we get to sharpen along the way.
Mhm. I love that.
So,
I love that
yeah.
so much. Before we go, can we just talk about your book for a moment? We
Oh, yeah.
talked about your book at all, and when you said, "I was working on my blog," let's talk about the published book that you have out, that I have. I bought your book. Is there another book coming? Tell us what this book is and all the things.
So this book was actually written while I was going through that difficult stage in my life, right? Like my divorce and depression. And it was my self-healing journey through poetry and just writing. I didn't know that it was like poetry because
Hmm.
things just rhymed in my mind. And so I wrote a couple of prose and this just rhyming essays. Also another thing that I learned, right? So my book is just my self-healing journey through prose and poetry, um, and the stages of grief that we experience in a relationship. So I didn't realize I even had those pillars until I was in a therapy session and she, my therapist was explaining like these pillars, that phases that we go through. And I was like, and I would share my writing with her. And so she was like, kind of like when you talked about this poem. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I can write, like maybe I am an author or something, right? And so it's called And I Felt It All because I felt like I felt all these emotions that helped me bloom into the woman I am today.
Mhm.
Uh, and you can find it anywhere. So just Google it. And I Felt It All. You can find it in Barnes and Noble, Amazon, any favorite book retailer. Um, it's really short read,
Mhm.
um, but very raw. I think that was like my rawest version.
Mhm.
And it was like my raw emotions encapsulated in words.
Mhm.
And the other day I had somebody come up to me at work and they were like, I read your book. And I said, yeah. And then she goes, did that really happen to you? And I said, yes. And then she goes, oh my gosh. It was just like the state of shock and awkwardness at the same time, right? Because I didn't know what to say. And then she goes, I feel like I know you know you. And I said, yeah, I know. I feel like I know me now.
Yes.
And so,
I
yeah,
love
that's
that. Yeah, the book is really great. I remember when I first got the book and I started reading through it, and I remember I started crying. I had real tears in my eyes because it is very raw, it's very vulnerable, and it's so, so, so powerful. So, yes, I recommend if you enjoy short reads and poetry, you would definitely like this book. So I
thanks.
also feel like when you were like, you can find the book anywhere. It's in Barnes and Noble, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here with a published author. It feels like I'm talking to a famous person.
Aw, thanks. I feel the same way about you. I like admire your work so much. It's like everything I know about the nervous system is like between you and Andrew Huberman. That's a big deal.
Wow, oh my gosh, thanks for the comparison. That's huge.
It's like you put it into practice. He talks about like all the things, right? But like you make it practical. And I practice, a lot of what you share, and I share it with other people too. Because I think it's just so powerful to regulate your nervous system, to be more in touch with yourself. Like, I think we live in such a disconnected, like self disconnected world. Like, we're connected, but we're disconnected from ourselves
Totally.
the majority of the time. And it's just such a powerful tool when we are connected again with ourselves. And, you know, I did some of your breathing exercises too. I felt like this like intense, like just stiffness in my shoulders. And then I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like going to your page, like, what would Tatiana tell me to do right now? And I'm like trying to search for it. But it definitely like helps to know those tools to go through, challenging things in life because they don't stop. And um, I read this quote not too long ago and I loved it. And I'm trying to like recall it exact because I think it just was so beautiful. But I'm healing myself so that I can be here for you now.
Mm.
Right? Like, I cannot be fully here for you when I haven't healed.
Mm, I love that
right?
so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just think I'm grateful for some of the people that surrounded me during, difficult times to be able to hold space for me. And so being able to teach other women, other people, how to hold space for themselves really allows them to be a better version of themselves. I have, even as an educator, I believed that one of the main reasons I got into leadership was just so that I could help others grow. But I also felt like if I can leave you with a better version of yourself, I have made an impact. And
Mhm.
so I think I carry that with me now more so than ever because it's just, it's a beautiful experience. It's a hard thing to achieve. It's like that one thing that nobody's going to give you a prize and say, like, it's not a PR at all for running, right? Or like, I can't put a medal on the wall that says, I healed.
Totally. Totally. But in a way, I like to think that healing your nervous system is is the prize, right? Like that is the prize, right? Like because healing your nervous system is truly the foundation to everything that we do. And everything, I mean, I talk about this all the time, but like everything in our lives is just a reflection of the state of our nervous system. And I love that quote that you shared because I truly agree with it, right? Like healing your nervous system is the best gift that you could give, not just to yourself, but really to the people around you, right? Like I posted a reel about this a few months ago, I think, but I talked about how if you want to be a better mom, a better partner, a better daughter, a better provider, right, a better human in any way, a better friend, you need to heal your nervous system, right? Like that is the best gift that you could give to the people around you. I think that's the greatest form of love, to heal your nervous system. Because when you heal your nervous system, not only can you hold that space for other people when they're struggling, but you're also not projecting your own wounds onto other people, right? Like it's really difficult to be in relationship with someone who hasn't healed because they most likely 9 times out of 10 are projecting their stuff onto you. And so again, I think it goes back to just having that little tiny desire to want to grow and evolve. And once you have that little tiny desire, right, and you start taking those tiny, tiny steps towards healing and growing, that's when you can make true change.
Yeah. And I think it's an opportunity to, I don't know, to cleanse, right? Like to really reset in a healthy way. Um, yes, I agree with it just like full heartedly. I love the work that you do, what you
What that
share.
you do.
Yeah. And how you share it. Like it's great. And it's beyond great. It's beautiful. And I think, um, I don't know. I feel like we're entering an era where people do want to heal, they just don't know how.
Mhm.
And so it's an opportunity to share that how with others,
Mhm.
um, so that we can just have a better society. We need it,
Yes.
and we're seeking it.
Yes. I totally agree. Yes. So tell the audience how they can find you and connect with you if they enjoyed all of the gems that you shared with us today.
Yeah, so you can definitely find me on Instagram. So my handle is at Lisa Annabel, two N's, underscore coaching. Can I have a longer Instagram handle?
That's okay. I'll post it in the show notes too.
And then I do have a blog and it's lisaannabel.com. And I just write about personal things, but I also write about tools on how you can help yourself. I'm big on writing and journaling, so I do share a lot of like opportunities of what that could look like for you. And then where else can you find me? Yeah, I think those are my two main platforms right now. So
And don't
yes.
forget
Oh, and of course at Barnes and Noble.
I was just going I love
I
that.
always forget that. I don't know why, that I'm just so terrible at marketing. That's okay. That's not my job. My job is to just create and share, and it will fall with the right people.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much again, Lisa. Thank you for being so open to have this conversation with me. I hope you have a good night.
you too. Thank you so much for everything. And thank you for inviting me onto your show.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you absolutely loved this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on Apple Podcast, or take a screenshot and share this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at tatiana.holistic.coach. The more nervous systems we reach, the more generational cycles we break, and the more we contribute to a kinder and safer world. And if you're looking for somatic healing services, send me a DM and I'd love to chat on how I can support you. I'll see you in the next episode.